And welcome everyone to the University of Illinois Extension's Local Government Education Program, co-hosted by Rural Partners. Today's topic is local policy, state of cannabis and hemp policy in Illinois and across the country. This is David Lakeman, who is joining us from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. He's going to cover some information about legalization and production and that discussion of the Illinois model and other state models. And we're really just very grateful to have you on. This is a continuation of a series that we're doing on hemp and cannabis in the Prairie State here in Illinois. Last month, we had a session on production perspectives and challenges with Philip Alberti, who is a research program manager at the University of Wisconsin. And I'll put the link to that in there. If you missed that, you could follow up with that later. And of course, we have another session coming up next month on the tax revenue and metro, non-metro trends in Illinois for hemp and marijuana. And so today, with the state of cannabis and hemp policy in Illinois and across the country, we're so happy to have David Lakeman. And before I hand it over to him, I want to hand it over quickly to Ann Silvis, who is our Assistant Dean and Program Manager of the Community and Economic Development Program within Illinois Extension, and also on the board with Rural Partners. And she'll be just giving a few remarks before she passes it on to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, and welcome everyone. I'm really happy that you all chose to join us today. This program is a joint project from University of Illinois Extension, where I work, and Rural Partners. I'm also on the board, so I'm kind of wearing both of those hats today. But on behalf of Rural Partners and Extension, welcome. And David, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Thanks.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right again?
Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. And thank you to all of you for coming today. I'm very excited for this opportunity. I do in particular want to say to some of our colleagues joining us from Southern Illinois, Carbondale, I apologize if there's some repeat information. I just had the opportunity to be down there, not last weekend, but the weekend before. So I hope it won't be too boring for you, but I'm certainly happy to see you again. And I certainly hope that in the course of your conversation with Philip Alberti, you gave him a hard time for leaving us here in Illinois. He was certainly a very great resource to the state and to this program through his work at the U of I Extension School prior to his departure, and we owe him a debt of gratitude for some of the groundwork he laid. So that being said, again, thank you so much for having me. My name is David Lakeman. I'm the Cannabis Division Manager at the Illinois Department of Agriculture. That is a very bureaucratic word. So I regulate a large swath of the cannabis industry here in Illinois. We regulate that here at the department. So of the industry, the Illinois Department of Agriculture regulates the craft growers, which are the smaller craft cannabis grow facilities, the cultivation centers, and there are 21 of those, which were initially legalized under the Compassionate Use Program back in 2015, which were grandfathered into the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act passed in 2019. And I will certainly do my best to limit the number of acronyms and things, but just for brevity's sake, moving forward, I'll refer to that act as the CRTA. We also regulate the infusers, which make things like oils, some of the edible products that you see, as well as independent transporting organizations, which self-explanatory there. These are the organizations that would take product from a grow facility to an infuser, or from an infuser to a dispensary, or in between all of those facilities. In order to do that, you have to be a licensed transporter, and so we license those as well. We also work with the Cannabis Community College Vocational Pilot Program, another very small mouthful program, which I'm very proud of, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. And then, of course, we also regulate the industrial hemp program here in the state. That being said, we are not the only regulator of cannabis in the state. Fairly uniquely among state regulators of cannabis across the country, Illinois has split up the regulatory functions for cannabis across a number of different agencies. So you've heard what the Illinois Department of Agriculture regulates. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation regulates dispensaries. So the places, the storefronts where you actually go and purchase cannabis. We also work closely with our colleagues at the Illinois Department of Public Health, where the medical program remains housed. So if you have a medical card question or working on that program, that remains at the Illinois Department of Public Health. We also work with the Illinois State Police, and it's an interesting structure there because the state police do not have a regulatory role, but they work with us in ensuring compliance at these facilities. They work with us in reviewing security plans, and they refer potential criminal actions to the department, which then takes disciplinary action when it is warranted. We also work closely with the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, which manages the grant program that was established in the CRTA, as well as a few other programs I'll get to later as well. That being said, most other states do have, one basic cannabis structure. Illinois does it a little bit differently. Each different approach here has relative strengths and relative weaknesses. That is where we are now. And I think there's sometimes confusion, and I beg your forgiveness for starting with something so dry, but it is helpful to know moving into our discussion, because I think a lot of times not everyone realizes that structure. So what does it look like at the Department of Ag? So we have a division underneath which we have 3 bureaus. There's the Bureau of Inspections, the Bureau of Licensing and Administration, and a brand new Bureau of Laboratory Testing. This is either the first in the nation or one of the very first in the nation state-run cannabis testing labs, and we're very proud of that work. So we've just recently brought on the bureau chief for that bureau, who was a 20-year veteran of the Illinois State Police and working with those lab systems. We're currently building that lab, both in terms of developing the staffing and actually physically building it here at the Department of Ag building. We're very excited to be doing that work. The build out of the lab will allow us to continue to cement Illinois' position as a leader, not just on Illinois policy, but also on the science and research end of this nascent industry, and working with many of our partners, some of which are on this call, some of which are not, to both push forward the frontier of cannabis research and also ensure that cannabis lab testing and the testing of those products, which is the bedrock of a legal program, remains efficient and safe. Since 2019, when the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act was passed, the department has issued a number of new licenses. So we started off with 21, and that is the case when I started here at the department in 2020. And since that time, we have issued an additional 362 licenses. We have issued 88 of the craft growers. And these are facilities that were, in essence, made to model a craft brewery. So smaller in scope, focused on higher quality or niche products that might not be available for some of the mass growing of the larger cultivation centers. Now, the large cultivation centers, per the law, are able to grow up to 210,000 square feet of flowering canopy space. And what I've heard, and including at the event just 2 weekends ago, is there's some confusion about what that means. So a cultivator can grow up to that much of flowering canopy. So that means that space where you have flowering cannabis plants. That does not include their administrative offices or packaging and labeling rooms or labs or kitchens or locker rooms or restrooms. That is only the space requirement for how much space is actively growing flowering cannabis at any time. The craft grow facilities are limited to 14,000 square feet of flowering canopy space. They start at 5,000 and they're able to follow a progression laid out by the Department of Agriculture to expand that in 3,000 square foot increments up to 14,000 square feet. There are 54 licensed infusers, and I apologize, there are actually now 222 transporters licensed by this department to transport that product around. There are also 10 participants in the Illinois Community College program. And that program is one that we don't talk about as often. It's not one that you see as often in the news. It's not one of the more exciting parts of the program on its face, but it's one of the pieces of it that I'm the most excited about. When I started, when you would go into a cannabis facility and you would talk to the employees, and for those at higher levels or involved in product design or bud tending or any of those other pieces of care for the cannabis plant. And you would ask them, where did you get your training? The answer consistently would be Colorado or California or Oregon. And what we are doing with this program, and one that I'm so thankful the legislature had the foresight to enact, is working to develop the next generation of cannabis leaders across the entire space in terms of the biology, the science, the business, the management, even things that seem as simple as specialized HVAC systems or specialized the next leader in training these future leaders for this program. So that 5 years from now, when the first two generations of the graduates from this program are out, when you ask someone, not just in Illinois, but in Michigan, in Missouri, in Minnesota, in Iowa or Arkansas, where did you train? I want the answer to be Illinois. And that is a foundation that we can then build on, and bringing people here to get that training that they will keep here, stay here, make here their homes, and continue to help Illinois be a leader in this industry, even after, if and when federal legalization comes and that landscape changes. We are doing our absolute best to position Illinois so that we maintain that position no matter what changes may occur at federal policy. So we've continued to work with our partners in that program, as well as our partners in other university systems here in the state. And we are just so excited to see the development of new programs, new ag programs, across the state system and others focused on how to succeed in this business and to do it well. And the department is excited to continue to be a partner to the university systems and our academic partners in that effort. Moving forward, and it sounds like I don't want to step too much on the toes of your next presenter, but this has been a huge change in the revenue picture for Illinois as well. So in fiscal year 22, this program generated $445.3 million in tax revenue. And as a top line, that's great on its own. But one thing I want to note about that is that number is solely for the 21 major growers, the cultivation centers, and the previously existing set of dispensaries that have been in operation since the medical program. That revenue number does not include a single new licensee under the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. I suspect that will change significantly moving forward, right? So last year, $1.5 billion in total sales, much of which was generated from visitors from other states. And again, that's only with the limited number of licenses that were operational and had been since 2015. I suspect that there will be a significant change in that as these next rounds of dispensary licensees get operational, as the next rounds of craft growers and infusers start operating. The number I expect to change significantly. At this time, there are 6,049 active badged employees at IDOA facilities. And what does that mean? So every employee of a cannabis facility or licensee in the state must have an active agent badge registered either with the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. So these are direct employees of the companies operating the cannabis grow facilities, or transporters, infusers, et cetera. This does not include all the ancillary jobs, and an analysis by the administration allowed us to believe that there are roughly 30,000 total jobs in Illinois currently being generated by this industry. And again, that runs the range from HVAC to construction, additional contractors working for this, from IT to architect firms to to agricultural consultants, and as well as the regulatory structure here. And this is one more area where Illinois can be a leader and participate to moving this industry forward, in that we are working on, Illinois has some of the highest leadership standards on environmental and energy standards, for instance, in this industry. So driving forward innovation on the use of variable wavelength LED lights for grow facilities that are indoors. These plants are heavily specialized. They are a very far cry from what would grow outdoors 50 or 60 years ago. And so for some cases, they require precisely 12 hours of darkness, precisely 12 hours of light, a very exact amount of water, other care. And of course, all of this is very energy intensive. It's very water intensive. And so driving that piece of the industry forward, making those changes so that it is not quite so draining to run all those lights full time. This is just one more piece of kind of both the challenge for this industry as it grows, but also opportunity as it does. One of the other programs that we're very proud to partner with is the R3 program. So that's the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program. That program by law reinvests 25% of the tax revenues from the adult use cannabis market back into the communities that were most impacted by the war on drugs. And this is something that I am genuinely proud to be a part of. It's a very innovative approach that Illinois took. And just for reference, Illinois was in fact the very first state to legalize cannabis at the adult use level by an act of legislation. The 10 states that preceded us all legalized via a citizen-led ballot question. Illinois was the first to actually go through the legislative process and legalize this market. And I think you can see that in some of the innovative programs that it has developed to directly reinvest in these communities. So this program has dispersed over $150 million at this point in these community grants. Over 300 community organizations have done the work, worked with this program, worked with Lieutenant Governor's office and others to bring these funds, to bring these grants, to bring this investment back into communities that for so long have been left behind or who have been had a direct impact from the previous war on drugs. And we're already seeing growth from these things. These are resources that are invested directly back into the communities in partnership with community groups who know their areas best. And as those revenues grow, given that it's a direct percentage, so too will that piece of the program. The next slide, I wanted to just show a little bit give you a sense of where the new 48 craft growers are located. And while there is a clustering that you might expect to see somewhere around the Cook County and Collier County area, we have seen a greater diversity of geography in the new locations. And we're pleased to see that. So we have a fair spread through Southern Illinois, through Central Illinois, Northwestern Illinois, which is both an adventure for our inspectors as we travel out to these new facilities, but also great in terms of generating investment, creating these new jobs, and bringing some more of this program into the communities that hadn't previously seen it. One of the other pieces of the Illinois Cannabis Program as it was designed is the Social Equity Program. And that is a piece of the program designed to, again, encourage those who were directly impacted by the war on drugs to have a piece of this program so that it didn't just go to those who had the most, but spread the benefits of a new legal program to the entire state. And so with the new craft growers that were issued last year, 42% of those licenses are majority Black owned. 48% of all of those new licenses total are Black and Brown owned firms. There are 5 or 10% of those licenses that are women owned businesses. And 8% of them are majority Latino owned. What we understand is that number is broadly similar to the number of women-owned businesses across the country, if slightly lower. But we also understand that there's a lot of work to do. No part of this has been run perfectly. We are all people as well. And what we have done our best to do is to learn from areas where parts of the program didn't function as well as they might have, to learn from that, to make improvements and to move forward. That's evident in a number of pieces of the program, which again, don't sound exciting at first, but really do make a huge difference for our licensees. This includes moving toward an all digital agent badging system. When I began at the department, each of the agent badges was a physical piece of paper that was mailed by the department, which at any point could be lost. And at that point, that employee cannot go into the facility again. We have shifted that over into an entirely digital system that has interoperability with the Google Wallet and Apple Wallet functions on smartphones, so that you can have that in your smartphone at all times with you, so that you can have easy access to your facility. It is efficient. It has saved the state significant money in terms of simple postage costs, and it is one more piece of making the regulation of this business a lot more efficient. We've moved over toward and are completing the build out of an entirely digital online platform for businesses where they can adjust licensing information, get a sense of where where they stand in terms of the number of agent badges. It'll allow the state to maintain oversight of that, and as well as providing a greater amount of data as we move forward and consider the next round of licenses on our end. We have also been a leader in terms of providing translations of our rule and statutes into Spanish. And in fact, our first Spanish-speaking employee just started with us this week in order to be sure that we truly are reaching all corners of our state, all walks of life in terms of providing access to this program. With that, I want to move a little bit over to the other part of what the department regulates, and that is the hemp program. Regulating hemp and cannabis in the same division is sometimes presents interesting contrasts because hemp is federally legal. Hemp was federally descheduled in 2018 with the Farm Bill that the Congress passed. It is now a federally legal commodity like any other. So we have within the division what remains a federally scheduled substance, cannabis, and a federally unscheduled substance, hemp. And so that with the hemp program, the department works very closely with other partners in the federal government. We work very closely with the USDA, which is the entity that regulates hemp. And just recently, the department promulgated first notice for its draft hemp rules, which were drafted in accordance with the USDA rules. We have a federally approved state hemp plan. We're now moving toward the second notice of our hemp rules, which have taken into account all the comments we received with the first round. And just for those of you that don't know, and the rules process can be a little Byzantine or hard to understand. And I don't want to drop a bunch more acronyms. But the way that works is that the agency notifies the public that it intends to make a change to its rules. We post the draft, and then we open it up for public comment. The department did receive a number of comments, a number of thoughts, proposed edits, different language. We did hold a public hearing, which was extremely productive, and we got a great deal of information from that. We have now incorporated those comments where we were able, and in coordination with the USDA. We now are moving toward posting a second notice with the revised language. That will then move toward a subsection of the legislature called the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. Again, for shorthand, we call that JCAR. They will then review the draft that we've provided. They will provide their feedback, and it moves forward until it is published as an updated rule. So what is the difference here? Right, there are the scientific names for hemp and cannabis, but ultimately the primary legal difference is that hemp must be below 0.3% THC and cannabis is anything above that. This is a distinction that was made in the law that I believe at this time is certainly up for conversation. There has been a number of conversations I have heard on the floor of the Congress as the new Farm Bill is debated in terms of potentially raising that threshold or changing sampling sizes for hemp growers across the country per USDA rules. There have been conversations about changing that distinction to 0.5% or even 2.1%. Whatever the ultimate outcome is, of course, the department will abide by that. But that is the primary difference. Hemp can be grown legally, outdoors across the country, irrespective of what any individual state laws say. Cannabis cannot. That is dependent entirely on state laws. So how did the hemp program get to this point? Starting in 2015 and 2014, there was the Industrial Hemp Act here in Illinois. That was amended moving forward, and then the Farm Bill legalized this program at the federal level in 2018. In 2019, the USDA released an initial draft of their rules implementing that law. The final rules were not adopted until 2021. And at that point, all of the state programs then began crafting their own rules in order to be in compliance with the federal program. Now, we work closely with the federal government on this. Hemp farmers in their counties have to report to their FSA offices in the county each year as they work for planting and harvest. They also have to work with our program here at the Department of Ag. In 2022, we were successful in hiring our first hemp program manager, a gentleman who had been a part of the department for some time and part of cannabis efforts for some time. He brought a wealth of experience and has been doing a great job of getting the program built out a little bit more than it was. And now we are finalizing those rules, probably just in time for the Congress to make some major changes in the Farm Bill, at which point we'll need to adjust them again. But we're eager to be a partner to our hemp partners here in Illinois. We want to be a resource for our hemp growers and processors. Ensure that this is another industry that really can grow here in Illinois. This is just a basic overview of what the hemp grower process looks like. They must be licensed. The fees are $100 for the application fee, and then $375 for a 1-year application, $700 for 2, or $1,000 for 3 years. That is part of the process, of registering with the department. It must be tested by the department for THC content. But the department does not at this time provide a broader regulatory structure for that. The processors are an interesting piece of this industry in that they are not actually provided for in federal regulation under the Farm Bill. These are an Illinois-specific part of the industry, in which we provide that regulation, but there is not as much federal guidance or support. So they must be registered. There is no federal process, but they are, of course, an integral part of the program. How else do you take the hemp that is grown and turn it into anything usable? This is a service provided for by the processors, and there are a lot of different things that you can make from hemp. The sign I have here, which you can also see behind my desk, if right behind me, if my video turns back on after the presentation, is a program the U.S. Department of Agriculture launched in 1942 called Hemp for Victory. Hemp in the 40s was still used for a variety of industrial purposes and military purposes. Not much of it was grown in the United States because of passage of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. And so the United States and other nations imported most of their hemp from a limited number of areas, which included Singapore, the Philippines, and southern Ukraine. The United States primarily got most of its supplies from the Philippines. Of course, after December of 1941, much of that supply was not available to any of the non-Axis powers that engaged in World War II. So in 1942, the Illinois Department of Agriculture launched this program, Hemp for Victory, which was an educational program. It was targeted at bringing farmers across the country back into this industry. In Illinois alone, in the course of 1942 to 1944, over 40,000 acres of hemp was cultivated and harvested. And while this may seem like a lot, a single battleship in service in the Navy in the Pacific used over 35,000 feet of hemp rope in the course of its day-to-day operations. This is not to mention any of the smaller vessels or uniforms or any of the other myriad of uses that hemp was put to. And Illinois grew a huge percentage of the total hemp grown not just by the United States, but used by the Allies in total across the war. And the reason this is relevant is that Illinois is uniquely situated in terms of its topography, the climate, the soil. Hemp grows exceptionally well here. What it needs is a firm and supportive regulatory structure to enable that success, and that is what the department is doing its best to do now. And that doesn't take away from the fact that, of course, there have been challenges. The program launched in 2018. 2019 was the first year in which it could be grown legally. So, of course, there were challenges. There were challenges in sourcing seeds that didn't test hot. And again, hot being over 0.3% THC. Is a new crop, right? As any farmer will tell you, the first year of any brand new crop is going to have difficulties. As farmers figure out where does it perform well, what is the balance of sunlight and water that you want to get for it. Even having folks trained in how to care for it or know what success looked like, much less having availability of processors to be partners in terms of turning it into something else, whether it be CBD oil or rope or clothing or anything else. And then, of course, 2020, the next year, right as farmers were getting ready to plant, the COVID-19 pandemic began. And that presented the same host of challenges for hemp farmers as it did for any other industry in the country. Moving forward, then there was also a drought, and again, regulatory uncertainty. And again, federal regulatory uncertainty has been a huge challenge for the hemp industry here in Illinois. One of the most profitable pieces of this market is, of course, the CBD oil, which you see everywhere. The challenge there is no regulatory structure for that CBD oil anywhere. So when you see a sign at a gas station or even in a vape store, or even as I've seen at Bed Bath and Beyond, they often have the little check and it says tested. There's no guidelines for that, and no one knows what that testing covers. Right? Does it cover that it is not? We've tested to be sure this isn't actually sawdust, or is it actually testing for the things it tests for, or it says it tests for? This can be a real challenge, especially for folks who have regular drug testing. So members of the military, police and fire, or even CDL holders, right? If a product says it tests below 0.3% THC in it, and it is in fact above that, that can have huge challenges for individuals in the course of their livelihoods. And so this is just one thing that we've got our eye on, and we're hopeful to see further guidance on from the FDA, from the DEA, and from USDA, as this is now a federal program. In coordination with many of our other partners in other states, there is an association called CANRA, which is the Association of Cannabis Regulators. There has been a letter sent to the Congress sort of laying out these challenges. We are hopeful that some action can be addressed in the Farm Bill this next time around. There we go. And again, it's not just those military uses that hemp can be put to. I could go on for the entire hour we've got here in terms of some of the potential uses for hemp. You can make paper out of it, which is of a higher quality traditionally than wood pulp paper. It also lasts longer. Here in Springfield, there's an old archive called Prairie Archives that's across the street from the old state capitol. And in that facility, they have a number of newspapers that go back even dating before Illinois was a state. And you can tell the difference between when they stopped making hemp papers and when they started making wood pulp papers, because the hemp papers are simply in a drawer and they are as clear as the day that they were printed. And then you move up to when they shifted over to the wood pulp and they are heavily encased, they're in plastic and glass to ensure that they can last longer. Hemp is, of course, also easier to grow and much less impactful on the environment than the logging industry. You can make plastics out of it. You can make rope. You can make clothing. You can make a substance called hempcrete, which can be a fire retardant material used in buildings. There are oils that can be derived from it. Any number of plastic synthesis or plastics, oils. You can even make soap out of it. It is an incredibly versatile plant. And my hope is that, again, as this market matures, as the processing capabilities move up, that we'll start to see more of that grown here and grown here in Illinois. In the state at this time, there are 154 registered growers, 158 licensed processors, and 4,761 acres approved for planting. Of course, every year there'll be less than that harvested just because, of the same challenges that, again, affect all farmers. The picture here is of our 2023 Hemp Summit, which was held here at the department. We hope to have more information on the 2024 summit coming soon, which I think will also be again in March. Again, great turnout, great interest, in a place where hemp processors, hemp growers, science, academia, all of our partners are able to come together in one place and actually discuss this program. And we've heard since multiple times that it was extremely helpful to have that coordination, that networking. We're looking for ways to make that program even better next year. So stay tuned for that. We hopefully will have more details on that before the end of the year. With that, I'll move toward closing out here. I want to make sure that I leave some time for questions. So the next thing is what's next. So there have been some changes this year. The legislature, there was a large cannabis omnibus bill that was debated for much of the legislative session that ultimately did not pass. One piece of it that did pass, however, was a change to the 280E tax code, which impacts deductions that cannabis businesses can use just in the course of business that are available to all their businesses, but have been blocked from cannabis businesses. There are a number of other similar situations regarding our hemp farmers that we're hoping to look at in the years to come. For instance, right now, hemp farmers that are marketing entirely legal products are barred from advertising even on platforms such as Facebook. They often pay higher swipe fees, in some cases twice as much when selling these products at a farmer's market. There's also deductions available for industrial processes that are currently still not available to hemp or cannabis growers. Another big hot topic in the legislature this last session was the topic of Delta 8 or CBD. Delta 8 is a derivative of the hemp plant. And that's driven because many states legalized cannabis by specifying the chemical structure of Delta 9 THC. And so there have been changes that now create Delta 8. It's can be also an intoxicating compound. We've also seen development of Delta 7, Delta 10, Delta 12. As the science progresses, this industry changes so quickly. And these are products that can have the same impact as a Delta 9 product, but do not fall under the existing regulatory structures for those products. So the legislature was very interested in providing some, reviewing the state of that. And I assume that they'll be working on that again in the spring session to come. We'll also be engaging with our congressional partners on the 2025 Farm Bill, or working with them as that moves forward. The Congress has also scheduled multiple hearings on the Safe Banking Act, which would, while not legalizing cannabis nationally, would provide protection for banks looking to provide banking services to the industry. As some of you may know, at this time, the cannabis industry is entirely or largely unbanked. It is a cash business. And of course, that presents a number of challenges in terms of operating and finances, as well as a number of safety concerns, right? You have a large amount of cash at each of these places, then trickles down in terms of things like paying payroll or paying your insurance or rent or anything like that. And so that is another piece of this program that's been heavily discussed. Especially in the Senate, that has another.
David, hi, this is Nancy. You're breaking up quite a bit, and you might want to, at this time, maybe turn off your camera to continue audio.
Another piece.
And you might want to repeat your last few remarks that you mentioned. Okay, it looks like he dropped off for a moment. We'll just sit tight and wait for him.
Again, just network issues here at the department. So sounds like all you missed was just sort of the closing and kind of generally what next items. Does that sound right?
Yes, yep, that sounds good. And then I went ahead and reminded participants they can put questions in and we can start a discussion with you.
Great. Yep, sounds great. And again, I apologize for that. All I was saying is just, again, I'm excited for the work you're doing. I didn't get into the intro right at the beginning, but I am myself a Southern Illinois guy. My family's all from Sparta and Randolph County. I grew up between there and St. Clair County. And working with groups such as yours is really important to me. Making sure that, these jobs, this industry, provides for those areas, not just the larger areas, is a huge goal of ours. And ensuring that sort of the benefits of the program are as evenly spread throughout the state as we can. So in any case, yeah, as I said, very happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, let's see. So we've got one so far. Where is the state on issuing controlled substance licenses required by USDA for hemp testing?
That process, I think, is still, from everything I've heard, is still undergoing review at our sister agency of the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. I do also understand that there are going to be some pretty major revisions to those requirements in the Farm Bill moving forward, just because a number of states have mentioned that it's just not workable, and it will severely gap the industry moving forward. So we are working that at the state level, and also I believe those requirements are going to be changed at the federal level moving forward.
That's great. So I have a question myself there. Oh, we have another one. So to what extent does the cannabis market in Illinois depend on it remaining federally illegal to keep the prices high? If it were ever legalized, would our system falter due to new competition outside the state of Illinois system?
That's an interesting question. And to a degree, there's only so much we can predict, right? We don't know what that will look like. Will there, of course, be competition from, from Colorado, from California, from Oregon? Absolutely. But one of the major goals for us at the Department of Ag here is fostering as much growth as we can in the cultivation space specifically, because these facilities are very difficult and capital intensive to build. So the more we can get built out in Illinois, right, you're much more likely to expand one of those facilities than you are to build a brand new one somewhere else. So I think we do have Chicago has rapidly become a focus of cannabis finance and policy and science, not just for Illinois, but for the entire country. We're doing our best to make sure that we're providing all of the factors for success for this industry so that when the time comes, especially recently, Illinois was an island in a sea of non-legal states, and that's changed somewhat. But again, that infrastructure is extremely costly, extremely capital intensive. And I think Illinois is extremely well positioned to build on federal legalization rather than be swept under by it.
Thank you.
And you had a question, you said?
Yes, I know that you don't really want to get into the local policy discussion, but do you have any sort of zoning or other sort of local policy recommendations, from your perspective at state level and knowing sort of the limitations to what regulation at that level can be? Do you have recommendations from that perspective?
That's a great question. One of the first things we always tell our licensees when they reach out to us and say, hey, we've got a location, we're looking at building out, is have you worked with your local zoning board yet? Have you worked with your local zoning officials, the local boards of health? Work with them because they are going to be an incredible resource for you. And they're going to be helpful in guiding you through that process. From the local perspective, one of the biggest issues that we see often is the set aside. So it has to be a certain number of feet away from a list of things, primary schools, daycare facilities, etc. Having a sense of where those are, I have learned, is something that would be very helpful if you don't already have any cannabis business establishments in your municipality. Just make sure you have a sense of what those actual zones where the cannabis facilities can operate are for those conversations. Because what often happens is, a facility will express interest, but then there's, it takes a long time to get that set of things figured out. Also make sure that, licensees looking to operate, and of course, this is largely our responsibility, but work with them to know that despite the fact that it is a federally legal substance, other federal guidelines still apply. So a facility built still needs to comply with OSHA standards. We take health and safety extremely seriously here at the department. So, not just OSHA, not just the fire code, but the Nursing Mothers Act. Do you have a nursing mother's room? All of these different requirements to ensure that, it's a safe and healthy place to work that can also be a functional part of your communities. Just make a basic familiarity with the laws there, I think is the biggest recommendation I'd make. And of course, also use the department. Use us as a resource. I work with a number of local leaders, of municipal governments, all of that every day. We are Illinois natives, as I mentioned earlier. My wife and I spent 5 years in Boston prior to coming back here. And local government in Massachusetts is a very different beast than it is in Illinois. And so I worked very closely with them on the zoning laws there. And that is something I've brought back is, just how important making sure that process is effective is. And so I'm always happy to be a partner. And I would definitely encourage anyone in a municipal government looking at this to reach out to me, to reach out to the department, and we'll of course work with you and answer any questions you've got.
Thank you. I appreciate you talking about resources. I was wondering that what sort of interfacing in terms of resources might be going on in between state and local, and you probably have quite a bit of insight since you have a lot of conversations with local officials dealing with those interested businesses and zones.
Yep.
We have a few additional questions. With
Yep.
regard to hemp, can you speak again about hemp processors are covered or not covered and recognized? It makes a difference on what programs might be available, and I wanted to clarify, for instance, federal pass-through training dollars.
Yep. And the answer there, of course, is that it is a gray zone, and that's a kind of difficult question to answer, which is not helpful. But they are federally legal. They are just not covered by any federal regulatory structure, right? And so some of the limitations for cannabis facilities would not apply for hemp processors, but also some of the federal support that's available for hemp growers might not be available for hemp processors. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that the federal approach to processing programs is extremely inconsistent, both between states and also within states. And we are very hopeful that we get some better guidance on this moving forward. It is a challenge. And I wish I had a firmer answer for you. I mean, not just for you, but also for me and for all the folks who work with that system here, which I think also goes into the next question regarding, potential incentivization programs or attracting processing facilities to Illinois. Without ever wanting to pass the buck, that's certainly a conversation for the legislature. And I can say that we have engaged legislators on this topic, and we truly are very hopeful that at some point we can look at states like Montana or Kentucky, which have very strong incentive programs for processors, and maybe start taking a look at how they structure things to provide maybe some of those resources and support that those states do.
Sure, and I'd imagine that it's a little bit tricky being in the position you're in to take off that hat of regulation and put on your legislative analyst hat and want to offer models and advice, but perhaps this might be a place where you could speak to it a little bit and want to give you the opportunity to mention any considerations.
Sure, and of course, the primary answer there is that the department will happily serve as a resource to the legislature as they work on these programs and potentially changing them. As much as I would love to take off that hat and sort of say, hey, these are some things that would really help. We do have to be careful and be respectful of their prerogative to set policy here. What I will say again is that those states, I think, do offer a very positive model that Illinois could emulate. Being a leader on many of these industries, the challenge there, of course, is that nothing is static, especially in the cannabis and hemp world. And so it requires a lot of fine tuning moving forward. And I think this is a great opportunity to take a look back at what we're doing on hemp and, figure out what's working well and what can we tweak a little bit. And I'm hopeful that we can work with the legislature in the next years ahead to do a little bit better on that front.
Wonderful. We have another question that came through. Is there any discussion about adding hemp cannabis to the Illinois statute, exempting agricultural industries from local zoning regulations and permitting?
That's a fascinating question. And I know that during the hearings for the omnibus bill this last spring, that issue was mentioned. I'm not honestly sure, kind of where that effort stands with the omnibus not moving. I am certain that is something that's going to come up again this coming spring, though.
All right, want to definitely give folks a chance to put any last minute questions in there. We're approaching 1 o'clock. Mike Delaney, you may have a poll that you might want to put up at this moment, but I also want to invite you, David, to kind of share any takeaways you're thinking of or comments that you would like folks to walk away with or know about that maybe you have in the back of your mind. Sometimes there are questions that you think may be great to be asked, and if there's any that haven't been asked that you would like to kind of introduce and talk about, would love to just hear any sort of concluding thoughts.
Sure. In general, we are a growing program. To overuse a metaphor I use often here, both at Ag and across the state, we really are building the plane midair while the boarding process is underway, and occasionally one of the wings is on fire. And we're doing our best to meet those needs as they come up. To be a good partner for this nascent and growing industry. So that includes all the many of the folks on this call. So working with local leaders, working with municipalities to ensure that we are as much a resource for you as we are for the industry. That's important to us because ultimately you are the front line of where these places operate, where the employees live. And we want to be sure that we're providing for a safe and well-regulated environment across the board. So we're eager to continue to be a resource, do events like this, answer questions you've got. You've got my email. I hope that it can be sent out. It's part of the slides, but also feel free to reach out. I'm always very happy to answer questions. We're very happy to travel and meet with folks who are looking at this industry. Use this as a resource. It's an exciting program. We're looking to do better all the time, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to hear me out today.
Well, thank you very much. I want to really just, again, thank everybody for coming and joining us for this second session in our three-part series on hemp and cannabis in the Prairie State. And David, your presentation today was very enlightening and very much appreciated. On behalf of U of I Extension and Rural Partners, we thank you so much and wish you a great day, and thanks for all you do. Hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Thank you.